Good evening everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this particular video, I will be addressing, in my own investigation, how drugs are still entering into countries with border patrol. Now, in order to begin this analytic breakdown, I'm going to be placing one particular fact right here, right now. We live in a drug-addicted society. Now, when looking at where the drugs come from, predominantly South America, such as Mexico, for cocaine as an example. Now let's talk about a drug like cocaine, a widely used drug right here in the United States and in Canada. What happens when a huge percentage of the population essentially gets hooked to a substance that is very controlled? Well, the problem is, and we've seen it happen right here in Calgary, once there is such a depth of a drug addiction in the addict, the person is willing to do whatever it takes in order to get their hands on another fix. Whether it be committing crime, assaulting people, robbing, on and on and on. Now, in terms of what happens if we don't keep addicts fixed, essentially, we have just stopped right here in Calgary what we call as safe injection sites, where you can actively, in the past, could go to a hospital facility such as the Sheldon Schumer right here in the center of the heart of the city. And within this safe injection site, we saw that the idea behind creating a safe injection site was to specifically keep drug addicts addicted to drugs. The administering of the drugs was then changed, however. Rather than having to specifically cause crime in order to get their hands on drugs, the government would now provide the addicts the drugs that they would need in order to stay happy. Now let's talk about why are drugs still entering the countries of North America and everywhere else in the world. What do you think happens? What do you think happens when you specifically have a huge percentage of the population that is very much drug addicted, simply just not homeless yet? If you have a large percentage of the population that is drug addicted, you must then feed them their drugs to prevent outbreak. So, when looking at Mexico as an example, where the fifth largest employer in the entire country of Mexico is the Mexican cartels, with over 175,000 affiliates, including government officials ranging from Mexico and upward all the way through to Canada. Now you might ask, why are we letting criminals essentially within the government official positions? Specifically for the reason we still need to let drugs return or enter our country in order to feed the addicts of our society. Unfortunately, the problem is some criminals will get punished, some will walk away scot-free. Ultimately, the question abides by whom is the official of the government that is allowing these particular things to enter the country, and who are they getting paid by in order to allow these particular, you could say, hundreds of millions of cocaine to enter into Canada every year. In Windsor, Ontario, July 14th, 2026, I will not state the name of the judge, But a judge very much dismissed a $13.2 million cocaine drug bust on the Windsor Bridge between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario. The reason of this dismissal by this Ontario judge, the reason of the dismissal of this individual was his human rights were violated. Meanwhile, he was trafficking $13 million worth of cocaine across the border. As I have stated, we live in a drug-addicted society. Let me point out another fact for you as a viewer. We often speak about the destroying power of alcohol and what it did to the indigenous populations of Canada because they had never experienced such a substance in their life before. Do you think that Europeans, before crossing over to the Americas, had ever experienced such a thing as a coca leaf, let alone cocaine, or any other type of psychoactive drug? In my own research, I would conclude that just the same that indigenous folks were negatively impacted by the power of alcohol, Caucasian and European races that which began consuming cocaine, which is a American continent produced drug, which dates back a long period of time. Now, in terms of the coca leaf, which is the main ingredient for cocaine, you might find that the indigenous populations were rather useful of this plant, and as a result, they have a different reaction than the Europeans do. Europeans became hooked, and at that particular moment, they created a business. Now, at this particular point, some of you may question whom are the officials that might be working for the Mexican cartels within not just the Mexican government, but Canadian Parliament as well. If we were to specifically look now at where the immigration laws or drug importing laws are specifically not necessarily being really enforced, I would invite you as a viewer to begin doing your own moral compass and begin to think about why is it that we have such a drug pandemic in North America. Within North America, I would argue that at least 2 out of 3 individuals is addicted to a substance, which means that is 2/3 of the population. Now, when looking at that 2/3 of the population, what do you think happens to an addict if they don't get their fix? They go crazy. And according to the levels of cocaine, as an example, one controlled substance amongst many, but one particular substance such as cocaine, as I've stated, has the potential to cause addiction after one use, one line. Now you might say, oh, well, what's so bad about that? I don't know, let me ask you. How successful are you in your life at this particular time? Now, if you cannot realize that the fact is, drugs have absolutely destroyed North American society. We live in such a pandemic state that nearly 1 in 2 individuals has to take a pharmaceutical drug in order to treat their mental health, which has been impacted by drug use. And in the forms of addiction, if we have that many individuals that require drugs in order to function, you could say, addiction, according to the level or the quantity of the population spread throughout the North American continent, we might find one particular demeaning factor, a demeanor. What is the misdemeanor? We can actively see criminals may now walk freely across the borders, not just of the United States, but of Canada as well, and be faced with zero consequence, according to the government official, judge, etc., that which specifically oversaw the case. And the idea of creating a safer world. Do you care about the entire world, or do you care about the world you live in currently? I would argue both should be correct. Because you see, controlled substances are traveling throughout the entire hemisphere of the earth. Within the entire hemisphere of the earth, you may find drugs of all different originating countries. But ultimately, the main drug cartel, you could say, is found on this American continent. Now, I will be very careful choosing my next few words. When looking, what do you see? I see a world overrun by addicts. And I see a world overrun by people making money off of addicts. Why is civilization destroying itself? Would you say the chase of the dragon is getting to the place where you thought you would end up, but instead you have found yourself in such a dark hole as an addict that you keep digging yourself even deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into this addiction, not realizing the potential for life at the price of this drug? Do people realize how many lives are required in order to get one brick of cocaine across the border? Imagine how many individuals die for one single line to get that cocaine to you, for that one single line. Now, to all my liberal folks, which would argue for the enjoyment of drugs, for immigration policies, on and on and on. If drug use does not bother you, then I would question whether or not you yourself have not delved so deep into that addiction that you yourself don't see what's wrong with that. Meanwhile, as I have just stated, nearly 3 people per country die in order to make one shipment of cocaine across a border out of an exporting country. Does that cocaine smell like blood to you now? Because I would argue cocaine is a blood diamond. Human lives are sacrificed in order to get this product worth a lot of money, in order to get it everywhere in the world. And people do not realize the atrocities that are committed, not just to women, to men, and to children, in order to get drugs across borders. To my fellow Canadians, I invite you to get sober, because the only way we can stop these drug traffickers that are destroying our civilization, meanwhile they make bank. At this particular time, I would lean towards the leaders of our countries to see what exactly is it that they will do in order to stop substances, human trafficking, and illegals from destroying countries from within. Thank you.